Have you ever stopped to think that hell may be working in your favor? It may seem absurd at first glance, but what if I told you that that spiritual attack that almost made you give up, that spiritual ordeal that left you groundless, were actually shaping something powerful inside of you? What if the silence of God that bothered you so much was part of a strategic plan to reveal to you what only God's chosen ones can bear? This is not just another content. It is a spiritual key about to turn. There are people who believe that evil acts alone, without control. But those who have already awakened spiritually know, God does not lose control even for a second. When He allows the evil presence to creep in, it's not because He has forgotten you, it's because He's teaching, forging, refining. What looks like punishment is often divine intervention in disguise. And when you understand that, everything changes. Pain becomes purposeful. And spiritual warfare, meaning. Do you really think that demons waste time on those who are already on the ground? Of course not. They rise up against those who carry light, against those who have a mission that threatens hell. God's chosen ones are prime targets. Because where there is light, there is struggle. And where there is resistance, there is revelation. Every attack you suffered, every door that closed, every sleepless night. All of this may be pointing to one thing: you are much closer to your destination than you realize. And this is not a pretty theory. It's practical. It's real life. How many times have you gone through situations that seemed like the end? But then did you understand that there was the beginning of everything? Evil tried to stop you, but ended up pushing you in the right direction. And that's the beauty of it, evil working for good. Even without knowing it. Even though he thinks he is winning. In the end, it is just another instrument in the spiritual plane that God wrote for your life. If this content is already making you look at your pain with different eyes, comment below, Key 7, because you are about to open a new dimension of understanding. And don't forget, there are things that only those who have passed through the furnace understand. So, stay with me until the end, because what you will discover here can prepare you for the biggest spiritual leap of your life. There are times when everything falls apart at once. Nothing goes right, doors close, relationships shake, and even sleep escapes. In this kind of storm, many think they have been abandoned, but God's chosen ones know, God's silence is not always absence, sometimes it is strategy. It is like a general who observes the battlefield from afar to identify where the enemy is going to surrender. Chaos is not chance, it is exposure. And every exhibition reveals what was hidden. The spiritual attack, in these periods of silence, seems to come from all sides. It's that day when the Wi-Fi goes down, the car breaks down, the boss freaks out, and the heart weighs down. But what seems like simple bad luck is often a spiritual war being waged in the invisible. The evil presence manifests itself not because you are far from God, but because you are closer than ever to the hidden purpose. When hell moves so strongly, it is because heaven is about to take a decisive step. But God waits. It allows. During this time, many rebelled. They ask, where is God now? But His silence is proof that you are at the center of the spiritual realm. He does not shout when He trusts in His strength. The strength of the chosen ones does not depend on noise, but on endurance. Silence serves for evil to reveal itself, because when the enemy talks too much, he gives himself away. And when that happens, it's as if a light bulb goes on in the dark and you can see the wires that were manipulating you. Examples. Clear. Imagine a person who loses their job unexpectedly. In pain, she enters into prayer as never before. A few months later, he discovered a vocation that had been dormant. Unemployment seemed like punishment, but it was divine intervention. God's silence there served to make room for spiritual awakening. He didn't speak because He was teaching. The noise was just evil trying to convince you that you were forgotten, but it wasn't. The chosen one feels, even in the midst of pain, that there is something bigger happening. This inner struggle, this spiritual trial that seems meaningless, is precisely the proof that there is a greater spiritual plan at stake. What looks like disorder is just the preparation for spiritual victory. And at that point, when everything is still dark and the noise of chaos echoes, that's when you start to realize, perhaps God is letting evil work for a reason. It is difficult to accept, but sometimes God himself allows evil to approach. And it's not because he wants to see the suffering of his chosen ones of God, but because there's a hidden purpose in it. The spiritual attack, in these cases, is not a failure, but a tool. A kind of push to get you out of your spiritual comfort zone. When all goes too well for too long, the soul falls asleep, and spiritual awakening sometimes needs a push. The interesting thing is that when God allows the evil presence in certain scenarios, he already knows the end of the story. Evil acts thinking it is in control, but it is being used. It is evil working for good, without knowing it. And you only realize this later, when you look back and see that that betrayal, that crisis, that delay, took you exactly where you needed to be. It's hard to live this, but revealing to understand later. Want a practical example? The person who was betrayed and, therefore, left a toxic relationship that was suffocating their identity. At the time, she thought she lost everything. But there was the invisible hand of God at work. It was a spiritual trial that revealed how much she needed to find herself again. Divine intervention was hidden in the movement of evil. And the silence of God? It was just him saying, "Calm down, I'm writing something bigger here." That's why attacks never come in vain. Each spiritual war waged carries a learning that the comfort zone could never offer. And the chosen one understands this over time. Pain is no longer just pain, it becomes a seed. And like every seed, it dies before it sprouts. It seems like the end, but it is the beginning. And it is precisely then that one begins to realize that there is a spiritual plan being orchestrated behind the scenes. What looks like punishment is often a gift wrapped up in inner struggle. God has not lost control, he is just allowing chaos to push you in the right direction. Meanwhile, the enemy believes he is winning. But spiritual victory has already been decreed, it just hasn't been revealed yet. And when it comes, it will make it all make sense. But before that, there are signs that indicate that this attack has a function, to reveal something bigger. When the spiritual attack intensifies, most panic. But those who have already awakened spiritually begin to notice a pattern. The strongest attacks happen before the biggest revelations. Hell does not waste ammunition on those who do not pose a threat. God's chosen ones carry a light that troubles the darkness, and so they are persecuted with more ferocity. It is as if chaos is trying to erase a heavenly announcement. What many call bad luck or bad phase, is actually the echo of a spiritual war where you are the target, because your mission is real. The enemy only acts with intensity when he senses that something big is about to happen. And here comes the silence of God. Not because he doesn't care, but because he knows that this struggle is the process of activating your calling. No wonder. It is not meaningless. It's part of the preparation. Have you ever noticed how, right before someone meets spiritually, it seems that everything goes wrong? A young person who begins to seek God more can suddenly find himself isolated, misunderstood, even persecuted. This is no coincidence. It is a clear sign that the spiritual plane is in motion. And it is at this moment that the strength of the chosen ones is activated, not by the absence of problems, but by persistence in the face of them. The spiritual trial that comes these days is so intense that it can make you doubt even your own sanity. But breathe. God knows that it is in this pressure that gold is purified. Each tear has a right address. Each difficulty is a gear. And when the wheel turns, you realize that everything was aligned for a single hidden purpose, to make you see your true identity. And this, my friend, hell fears. The interesting thing is that the tighter the attack, the clearer your mission becomes. It's a spiritual equation, where there's more resistance, there's more relevance. And God, with his invisible protection, watches. He doesn't spare you from the fight, but he makes sure you don't fall. Because there, on the invisible battlefield, it is being revealed who you really are. And this will inevitably attract the eyes of the enemy, and awaken the reason why he fears you so much. It is curious how, many times, those who are spiritually firm are precisely the ones who are beaten the most. It seems contradictory, right? But the spiritual world works in another logic. Those who are already lost, the enemy leaves alone. They don't need to attack those who have already surrendered. Now, God's chosen ones do receive constant pressure. Because they carry the spark of light. They bother the darkness. And where there is light, there is war. The spiritual attack is the answer to your positioning. The more you align with the spiritual plane, the more you become visible on the invisible battlefield. And that's where the persecution comes in. Not because you are wrong, but because you are too right. It's like an alarm that goes off when someone enters forbidden territory. If you're being attacked, it's because you've gone where hell didn't want you to tread. An example of this? A woman begins to pray daily, fast, seek discernment. Suddenly, disturbing dreams, family quarrels without explanation, a feeling of spiritual heaviness. This is no coincidence. It is the evil presence reacting to her spiritual awakening. The enemy has realized that something has changed, and is desperately trying to stop the advance. But what he doesn't understand is that the more he presses, the more he strengthens. Spiritual trial becomes, in this context, a tool of confirmation. If you're being the target, it's because you're carrying something precious. Evil works for good even unintentionally. The attack validates the mission. The silence of God, again, appears. But now not as absence, but as confidence. He knows you can handle it. He knows that you are being refined. And that this inner struggle is forging someone unbeatable. So, the next time you feel like you're being shot at from all sides, remember, demons don't attack those who are already surrendered. They attack anyone who threatens their territories. That changes everything. Because instead of feeling abandoned, you begin to understand, I'm on the right path. And maybe, just maybe, this pain is shaping you into something even bigger than you think. It is strange to think that even evil played a role in his growth, but it is true. The invisible enemies, the ones you never saw but felt, shaped you in ways that blessings could never do. The spiritual warfare you faced wasn't just resistance, it was training. Each spiritual attack has forged in you a structure that today sustains your faith. God's chosen ones are not formed in comfort, but in combat. Remember that phase when it seemed that everything and everyone was against you? That was not just persecution, it was stoning. It is as if God had allowed friction to reveal the brightness. The spiritual plane even includes the moments when you felt broken, precisely because that was where you were being rebuilt. The strength of the chosen ones is born of pain and grows in silence. The inner struggle wasn't just emotional, it was a sacred battle. Want a clear example? The person who, since childhood, has faced rejection, bullying, abandonment. But he never lost the ability to feel. On the contrary, he became someone sensitive to the suffering of others, empathetic, strong. This did not happen by chance. This sensitivity is the result of the spiritual awakening caused by pain. Those invisible enemies they tried to destroy, ended up being the ones they shaped. Divine intervention sometimes seems absent in the midst of battle. But when you realize how much you have matured because of your opponents, you understand that even evil has worked for good. It is hard to accept, but necessary. God's silence, in these moments, was not punishment, it was strategy. He knew that what would bring you down back then, today would be just another step. Because now, you see with different eyes. And this explains why the spiritual trials of the chosen ones are more intense, because they are the ones who carry the greatest hidden purposes. It's not about punishment, it's about training. And training hurts. But it also awakens gifts, reveals identity, builds faith. And all this is just the beginning, because evil, without knowing it, continues to be used to accomplish something much greater than it could even imagine. There are pains that seem to scream inside the soul, right? And, as strange as it may seem, these are the ones that teach the most. God knows the language of the soul, and sometimes pain is the only form of communication it deeply understands. God's chosen ones are not spared from pain, precisely because they have the sensitivity to listen to what it reveals. Spiritual trial is a megaphone from heaven to awaken that which was dormant. The spiritual attack, at certain times, is the most direct way to make the spirit react. It's not punishment, it's called. It's as if God said, "You've forgotten who you are. Let me remind you." And then comes the discomfort, the frustration, the discomfort. It is the screaming soul that is being forced to grow. Spiritual warfare does not come to destroy, but to activate something that was inactive. And this activation, it changes everything. Practical example. A person who goes through a sudden bereavement. The pain is so great that nothing else seems to make sense. But in this forced plunge into silence, she begins to see beyond. He feels God in a way he has never felt before. What was a loss, became a connection. What seemed like an end, became a beginning. Divine intervention in these cases was not visible, but it was profoundly real. It is in this kind of suffering that spiritual gifts often flourish. Sensitivity increases. Discernment is sharpened. Prayer, which was once routine, now becomes survival. Spiritual awakening often comes in the midst of chaos. Because when everything falls apart, all that remains is to look up. And then, finally, you realize that you are being molded into something greater. Something that evil can never erase. Pain, when accepted wisely, becomes a key. A key that opens perceptions, gifts and revelations. And this key is given to the chosen ones not as punishment, but as preparation. Because after the pain, comes clarity. And with it, spiritual victory. But before that, it is necessary to face pain with spiritual eyes. Because there, at the deepest point of the well, God is digging passage to the next level. There is a divine irony that few realize: evil, no matter how much it tries to get in the way, always ends up serving God's plans. It's like a pawn playing chess with a master, no matter how much it moves against it, it ends up being a winning piece. God's chosen ones live experiences like this all the time. The evil presence rises, but it does not know that it is being used as a bridge to something greater. Evil works for good, without having any idea about it. It is in the midst of spiritual warfare that this logic begins to reveal itself. The enemy thinks he is winning when he touches something precious, but little does he know that he is activating a hidden purpose. The suffering it causes pushes the chosen one closer to God. Spiritual trial becomes direction. The fall becomes rebirth. And the silence of God? He is still there, observing, because he has already seen the end of the film. Think of a person who has been publicly wronged, shamed, humiliated. It seemed like the end. But that situation opened doors to unexpected connections, freed them from rotten bonds, and generated a new beginning. Divine intervention did not arrive with a fuss, it arrived in silence, orchestrating everything behind the scenes. Evil thought it won, but only pushed it to the right place. The inner struggle then becomes the turning point. You don't understand everything as you live, but you feel that there is something being worked on in deeper layers. And, over time, he realizes that all that spiritual war only revealed who was really by his side. The strength of the chosen ones grows in the field of pain, but flourishes in the field of overcoming. What seemed like persecution became formation. And the most intriguing thing is to realize that the more the enemy tries to interfere, the faster the spiritual plane advances. As if each attempt at destruction served as an impulse. The evil presence has no idea that it is stoking the flame that will burn away all that is false. And when you start to see that, something changes inside. Because, after all, if even evil is working in your favor, what will come after that? After the storm passes, there is a different silence in the air. It is no longer the silence of God that precedes war, but the silence that announces reward. God's chosen ones, when they survive the worst, don't just come out stronger, they come out transformed. The spiritual warfare that seemed endless was actually the gateway to a new level of authority. And this reward is often not immediately visible, but it is real. It is as if the soul has undergone a complete reformation. The spiritual attack left scars, but also marks of glory. What once broke you, now strengthens you. Spiritual trial has become a curriculum in the invisible world. And when evil tries to approach again, it finds a territory sealed by invisible protection. You are no longer the one who entered the war. You are now the threat that hell fears. An example. That person who faced deep depression, isolated, discredited, and today he guides other people out of the same abyss. She didn't win just for herself, she won to make way for others. Divine intervention was there all the time, even when it seemed like absence. And now, she carries authority. Because those who faced hell head-on, and still remain standing, have a voice in the spiritual world. This invisible reward manifests itself in different forms: peace in the midst of chaos, wisdom that surpasses logic, discernment that sees the invisible. It is a spiritual awakening that has no turning back. And even if no one sees what you carry, the whole sky recognizes it. The strength of the chosen ones is not noisy, it is solid. It is the calm of those who have passed through the valley, and now he understands that all that had a hidden purpose. And if you've come this far, you may be starting to see this spiritual plane more clearly. Because after everything you've faced, there's only one possible direction: up. And now that you've survived the worst, you're more than ready to find out what happens when demons unknowingly work to lift you up. And now that you've seen all this, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Will you let the revelations die like another video that touched deep, or will you use every word as ammunition to win your next battle? Because the truth is that you didn't go through all that for nothing. Every spiritual attack, every spiritual trial, every silence of God. They were clues, codes, invitations for you to assume your position in the spiritual plane. Will you continue to accept the lies of hell, or will you begin to see that even evil had to bow before God's hidden purpose for your life? It's time for you to live as someone who carries invisible protection, and not as someone who lives running away from the next scam. You have been shaped by your invisible enemies. So the question now is, what are you going to build with this strength of the chosen ones that you carry? Comment below, ready for war, if you understood that all this is more than theory, it is a practice of spiritual survival. And he answers, what was the biggest attack you have ever overcome? Share it, because you can be the answer for those who are going through exactly the same battle right now. Your story matters. And if this content made sense to you, subscribe to the channel now and activate notifications. Because there's a lot yet to be revealed, and you can no longer afford to walk in the dark. Here, we go together, from battle to battle, until complete spiritual victory.